you'll hear my voice, but I'm going to stay off camera just so I can set the picture. I am devastatingly good looking and also as sleek as a racehorse after 21 years on the grey sheet. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. I sort of, well, let's just very briefly say my first memory is of eating. I think I was compulsively eating in my high chair. I was thin as a whippet until I got to about the age of 9, and then the weight started going on. I was put on my first diet at 11. I was a very fat and unhappy teenager. I went through an exercise bulimic phase when I was exercising very hard when I was in the army, but eventually that phase ended and I started putting on weight. And by the time I was 40, I was literally a kind of lard mountain and feeling very bad about myself. And at that time, I went to see an industrial psychologist, and I just mentioned to him that I had a couple of problems, and he said, like what? And I said, well, my weight is a problem. And he said, well, from what I know of you, your action profile, the way you handle things, I can be certain that you will find a solution to that problem one day. And you know how right he was. I found a solution in the end, and it was called GreySheet, but I didn't find it immediately. By the time I was 43, I had destroyed 2 careers, 2 marriages, and lost a huge amount of money. And I was just about to embark on my 3rd career, my 3rd marriage, when I was 12th stepped into another fellowship. In fact, I then joined two other fellowships, and I was in recovery for a year, and things weren't too good, not going too well. And I noticed one day that I was consuming baked goods rather like I used to smoke. I was chain grazing. And so then at that point, I heard about a fellowship, another fellowship, not this one, but that dealt with food issues. And I joined that fellowship. And for 4 years, I was kind of abstinent, and that sort of went quite well. But eventually, I started losing weight, and I couldn't stop. And I got very worried about this. You know, I saw the doctor. The doctor sent me to a nutritionist. The nutritionist said, eat more, and I did eat more. And I just kind of wasting away, as if my spirit had decided to die. That was all there was to it, you know. So having been extremely large, I was now wasting away, and very worried. And it was at this time I met somebody who weighed and measured their food, and I was impressed. I thought, well, this is interesting. But I actually phoned them up for another reason. I was going to ask them if they would sponsor me in another program. But what actually came out of my mouth was, you know, would you sponsor me on the GreySheet? And so I got into GreySheet by mistake. That's the long and short of it. And I'm very glad. It's one of the best mistake I've ever made. I got abstinent immediately. Thank God. It was very stressful to start off with because I didn't understand that you guys in the fellowship were there to help me. I thought you were there to catch me out and doing something wrong, you know. So I was a little bit avoidant and anxious to begin with, but I soon got the idea, and I got the result. I returned to my sort of a normal weight, and in fact, then, you know, my weight started going on, and I started getting sort of downward food changes. So in GreySheet, we have a sponsor. One of the things we do is weigh ourselves once a month. We just report that weight to our sponsor, and the sponsor then keeps an eye on that, keeps a record, and makes sure that if we are losing weight, we get a food increase. If we're gaining weight, we get a food reduction. And in this particular phase of my recovery, I had actually, having risen to my goal weight, I then went on up and up because I was on a kind of a rebuilding program. And so I had to start having downward food changes, and I had actually 11 downward food changes, one after the other. And now I just stay at my goal weight. I might be a pound or two up or a pound or two down, but generally speaking, I'm just my goal weight, because the amount of food that I'm eating is exactly what's necessary to maintain my weight, and no more, no less. And I know that because, I'm weighing and measuring, and I don't have to make up any silly excuses like, I can't understand. I just look at food and I put on weight, or I've got overactive thyroid or anything. I don't play any of those games. The amount of food that goes into my mouth is sufficient to maintain my weight. That's it. This is the beauty of GreySheet. I can stop lying and just say, I now eat the right amount of food. And it's really good food as well. On GreySheet, we can't really do a lot with packaged foods because they contain a lot of ingredients that are not abstinent. So, it's fresh proteins, fish, meat, that kind of thing, dairy, and fresh vegetables, which I cook myself. There's raw vegetables, and there's edible oils and fruit. And it's, as you might expect, the kind of fruits and things that I used to eat in my eating days are the very sweet or very starchy ones, and they're not on the GreySheet. The food that's on the GreySheet tends to be low carbohydrate, and I am a carbohydrate sensitive person. It's carbs that sort of would get me putting on the weight. And it's just such an amazing thing to be able to sit down, to eat a thoroughly nutritious and thoroughly enjoyable meal, and finish the meal without a whisper of guilt. Because I've neither eaten too much or too little. I've eaten exactly the right amount to maintain me. In other words, I'm not excessively consuming the world's resources or doing someone else down. I literally eat what I need to eat, and that's a great feeling. Just at the end of the day, saying, "Well, that was a good meal." And there's another one coming along, because in my pre-GreySheet days, I used to diet. Now, dieting said to the little boy inside me, "You're going to starve. We're going to starve you," and and he would be terrified by this starvation that was going on. And of course, once the diet was over, he would just pig out. Just go for any food he could, because he couldn't know when the next starvation was coming, you see. Now, it's as if he's now just sort of been lulled to sleep. He's just sleeping, he's happy. He knows there's another meal coming along. He knows that I cannot starve him. I cannot overfeed him. I'm just going to have another regular abstinent meal. It's coming along. Now, this is part of the benefit of GreySheet, is the physical side. And it completely and absolutely addresses the physical side of my illness, compulsive eating. But it also has a remarkably powerful effect on the emotional, mental, and spiritual part of my recovery as well. And it's one of those things where you just have to experience it to know what I mean. On the emotional side, I'm very much more emotionally stable than I've ever been. I can actually now contain my feelings and not act them out. I can deal with whatever's going on in a calm manner, because if I am having feelings, it's like I'm having them, I'm experiencing them, but I'm holding them. I'm not splurging them out on other people, or acting them out, or acting them in, or I'm not grabbing food in order to medicate my way or anything like that. I'm just having them, experiencing them, letting them go, and they just pass. And so then I can respond moderately as the situation demands. Because so often, I found in recovery that the way I react to things emotionally is not really about what the present situation is. It's about me and my history. It's about stuff that happened a long time ago. And it's a kind of it's an ab reaction. It's something that's happening because of some history, some trauma back there. So it's really useful to be able just to contain my feelings long enough to say, you know, is it going to be helpful now for me to be angry, to express anger? Or is it actually going to be helpful to let the anger pass and, you know, a bit of restraint and tongue and pen, and then come back to this later? I can do that today. Also, on the mental side, my thinking is very much more clear. I can express myself more concisely, more cogently than before. That's because I'm not in the food. I'm not in the fog of food. And the other areas on the spiritual side, it really seems now possible for me to have a relationship with the higher power, which is lively, active, real. I'm almost struggling for words. When we get into the spiritual area, it's always difficult to put things into words because we are talking things that are kind of beyond the physical. But I have a sense of conscious contact, of closeness to my higher power. That sense of I'm on the right track now and taking the next right action, and I'll go on taking the next right action until I take the last right action today, which is to get to bed on time. And life is amazing. It's orderly, it's sensible, it's moderate. And as we heard of the previous speaker say, it's like there's, as an addict, I don't know the middle way. I'm always trying to live in the extremes, you know, too much or too little, vastly overweight or, you know, dying of anorexia. I mean, you know, it's like the middle way is something I pass at high speed, ricocheting from one extreme to the other. And, you know, it's just so beautiful to be able to live in the middle, and the middle is where we find God. You know, so I'm a very, very satisfied customer of the Grey Sheet. I sponsor people. I help newcomers to get onto the Grey Sheet and get abstinent. The first part of abstinence is, you know, it does involve a withdrawal from carbohydrates, and that's often experienced in high-level feelings of maybe fear or sadness or anger, but that soon passes, and it's as if my body very quickly understands that it's going to get 3 meals a day. With, you know, roughly speaking, at these times, you know, breakfast will be around about 7 o'clock, lunch will be around about midday, evening meal will be around about 6, and we're all cool. And then we, you know, we fast between meals. You know, that's I don't eat between meals, so I'm fasting every day, but I'm feasting every day. Every day I get 3 lovely, abstinent, delicious, nutritious meals, and so. It's now, for me, it's a way of life. It's not a diet and like something that I do just for a few weeks and then, you know, hope that somehow I'm going to avoid putting it all back on again. It's a way of life. And so, yes, it involves challenging things like eating out, eating in front of other people and so on. And I used to worry about that, you know, but and then somebody said to me, you know, Nicholas, you wouldn't worry what people thought about you if you realized how seldom they did it. And you know, and that's the reality, that people are so often concerned with themselves, they're not really that bothered about what anyone else is doing. So, I mean, I've eaten meals at restaurants with people, even one-to-one. At the end of the meal, they haven't realized that I've been weighing and measuring my food. You know, I just sort of get over myself. There was a time when I really wanted to be the center of attention, except when I didn't want to be the center of attention. And so sometimes, you know, being in a restaurant, weighing and measuring food and so on, and thinking, is everybody looking at me? It's, I just remind myself, you know, there used to be a time when you used to want to have people's attention. Now I don't really care. Abstinence is the number one priority. It comes before everything else. It comes before what you think about me. You know, it's what I do to stay well. And that's also one of the things, you know, because sometimes people will ask, they say, you know, what are you doing? Not often, but, you know, when they do, I usually see it as a 12th step opportunity. That means it's an opportunity to carry the message. It's an opportunity to tell somebody about GreySheet in a positive way, because either they may need to know it or they may know somebody else who does. And so whenever I'm asked about GreySheet, I'll always answer, sometimes not at the time. I mean, you know, I will often, if I'm actually in the process of weighing, measuring my food, I need to focus on that, concentrate on that. I don't want to be giving somebody, you know, a running story at the same time. So what I'm going to be saying is, I'm going to, I just need to concentrate on this now, and I'll explain it later. Now, usually by the later, they've completely forgotten, the conversation's moved on or whatever. So, you know, I sometimes get myself off the hook that way. But for me, 12 stepping is about planting a seed. It's just somehow just letting somebody know that there is a solution, a proven, reliable solution to compulsive eating. If people want to stop, they can. There's a way to do it. And it's, you know, I'm absolutely, utterly, well, convinced from my own personal experience that this is a solution for compulsive eaters. And so if anybody out there has a problem, this is what I recommend. Sometimes they're looking for an easier, softer way. I did an easier, softer way for about 4 years, and it worked for me until it stopped working, till I started losing weight. And then it was like, you know, I needed GreySheet. And I've come off GreySheet once. I did 4 years, and then I came off because my sponsor came off, and I thought maybe I could go back to doing what I'd done before. You know, 6 months was enough to tell me that I needed to be on GreySheet. So now I'm a GreySheeter by convincement. You know, before I came onto the program by mistake. Now I chose to come back on, and you know, I hope day and a time to do this for the rest of my life. Sometimes I wonder what that must be like, you know, when I'm really old and decrepit, and you know, can't really see my scales, and my hands are shaking too much to the stuff sort of flopping over the edge of the cups and so on. But you know, I don't need to worry about that, because I just know that my higher power looks after me. He honors my commitment to abstinence and makes sure that I get what I need when I get it. And there've been so many instances of that. You know, some of you may know the story when I was on a walking pilgrimage to Rome, and I was running out of a certain food stuff that we need, but it's actually quite difficult to get hold of. And we came into this village in Italy, far away from anywhere. It just happened to be a health food shop open that just happened to have one packet of this particular thing in it, you know, and it had been waiting on the shelf there probably for about 3 years for me, but it was there, you know, and so I know that I'm being looked after as long as I put my abstinence first, as long as I weigh and measure without exception, and prioritize abstinence before everything. Everything else will work out. Even though sometimes members of my family get a bit irritated or whatever, they think, you know, I'm overdoing it or whatever, they see what I've become. They see the change that there's been in me, and they like that. And well, you know, maybe they don't realize that that's because I weigh and measure my food, but that's perhaps the biggest thing. And I could also say, I mentioned earlier that I was in other 12-step fellowships, I have other addictions. Well, all of these addictions have been vastly helped by GreySheet abstinence. It's as if GreySheet abstinence is like the foundational layer, the foundation of my life, the foundation of my recovery. And so I've really benefited from that in terms of my other addictions and compulsions. I've become so much less compulsive now. You know, I'm cool these days, and sometimes I wonder. yes, really, yeah. I'm just so grateful. I think I will leave it there. I just want to encourage anybody who's thinking about doing GreySheet, give it a go. I mean, I sometimes suggest that people do it for for 30 days or 90 days. Just try it, see if it works for you. You don't have to, doesn't have to start as a lifetime commitment. It's become one for me because that's how I like to live now. But I've seen people change within 48 hours of going onto GreySheet. You see it first in their eyes. It's like there's a clarity suddenly appears. Something changed. So if you're not sure whether GreySheet's for you, give it a go. Can't hurt. Thanks for letting me share.